TrenchMob Testimonies, where we dive into how your test became your testimony. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TrenchMob Testimonies, where we dive into how your test became your testimony. I'm Jeremy Hawkins, and we have Tony Davis with us as well. We have a special guest with over 4 decades of coaching that defensive line, Coach Rick. Give it to me, Coach. Coach Rick Petri. So, guys, just offline, I got his name wrong the first time, so I want to make sure it's said correctly. But, Coach, man, thank you for having us on, coming on with us today. We appreciate your time, and I know it's, you're in retirement right now, but still, we appreciate your time, Coach.
Well, it's good to talk ball. I'm whenever I get a chance to talk some football, especially defensive line, I love it. It's flattering that someone wants to listen to an old guy.
There you go. Look, man. I mean, you're the old guy, but you got a lot of wisdom. You've coached a lot of ball before, and a lot of different situations. So I know the people want to hear it, and I know I want to hear it. I'm itching to kind of get into it myself. I want to kind of start off with a quote, Coach. Is that okay with you?
That's good.
I'm gonna see if you remember this quote. It's time. After 43 years of never having to go to work, it's time to step away from the game of football and spend time with my wife, sons, daughter-in-law, grandsons, and family. Tell me about that, Coach.
Well, I mean, you guys are young in a career, but you all understand the time demands that's required, to be a college football coach, and the time that you're away from home, recruiting or working. And I worked with some early in my career, in particular, I worked with a head coach that in season, we were really grinded. There were times that we were 18-hour days, 16-hour was a lot, but that, it was different than, you film practice, you had to send the film away to get developed. And then you waited for it to come back, and we were in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and we had to send the film to Memphis. So someone at GA had to drive it over, get it developed, drive it back. So we're meeting and waiting for the film to come, and then, then so we could watch practice and try to make our corrections. So now with the videos and the computers and everything you have, everything is so instantaneous. But uh, you grind, you guys grind, you know what it is, and I don't know that right now that the recruiting cycle is so much. It seems to be even more challenging for assistant football coaches. And yet, I talked to a friend of mine who's at a university. He's talking about they had recruits in, for Saturday, unofficials, and they start tomorrow, like I think you guys do. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty tough now. That's pretty tough to do.
Yeah, I can tell you this right now, Coach. That recruiting is very difficult. I had to touch on it, Tony. I had to say something. When you said recruiting is getting to the point now. Is this just the minor leagues for the NFL or the XFL or USFL? It's kind of what it is. So a lot of those guys are getting paid, pretty good money. And some of them are getting paid a lot more than the coaches, especially at the Power 5 level. So it's a little different, coaching those guys. You coach them like they're professionals now.
And some of them, they're not going to go out like maybe they did in the past because their NIL money is so high, that they stay in school. Plus, you guys are dealing with the portal. I mean, please, the NFL has more restrictions than NCAA football, it seems like right now, and you spend all this time recruiting an athlete and you get them in and they all think they're going to start because of what their heads been filled with air about how they're this, that, they're this star, whatever star, this is their rating, from all these different scouting services. And then next thing you find out, well, he finds out that it's not that easy. I've got some challenges. I got some men that have been lifting and training for 3 years in front of me or 4 years. And they don't want to give up their spot, and I got to try to beat them. And it's a rude awakening for some of these guys. And so what's the answer for them? Leave. What are we teaching?
Exactly. But that's a whole nother, we can go down that foxhole and talk for hours. So
Yeah, that may be a whole week you could talk about
Right.
that.
No doubt. No doubt.
But it's even with all that said, it's a great profession. My wife and our two sons, and they thoroughly enjoyed it, and there's some benefits for them as well. And you got to choose as a coach. You guys got young kids, I believe, and you got to decide how you're going to spend your time when you're not at work. Are you going to spend your time with your family? Are you going to spend your time playing golf? Are you going to spend your time with other friends, or what are you going to do? So I always chose to. We had two sons. They played all summer was baseball, and so there was no vacations. Vacation was going watching travel baseball or whatever we were doing at that time. And I think that brings the family together too.
Yeah, like I said, we can dig into that recruiting forever. But I want to try to stay on track here. I don't want to keep you on here too long, Coach. I know you got things to do in your retirement time with the family. So I'm gonna let Tony go ahead and take on the next question.
Yeah, Coach, it's a pleasure to meet you tonight. Just walk me a little bit through your career now. You've obviously coached, Hall of Fame D lineman, All Pro D lineman. Some of the notable names: Warren Sapp, John Abraham. What was it like coaching those guys, man, on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I mean, you want to know my career first, or you want to know what it's like coaching them? What would you know?
Yeah, just kind of just talk to me about obviously you had a great career, but particularly those two D linemen. When you talk about the names Warren Sapp and John Abraham, just talk about what it was like to coach them and kind of their mentality they had approaching the game.
Well, Warren, number one, was always a very hard worker. I had him 2 years, and his last year is when he won the Lombardi when we were together. But his motivation and his energy at practice as well as at the game is what you all see highlights of him, and you see on ESPN, and you see the ways how loud and how vocal and the energy that he's plays with and enjoys the game. But that was him. That was a daily thing. That wasn't fake. That wasn't something that he just put on for the cameras. He played with that energy. He worked extremely hard. He was very prideful, just like John was, and he was easy to coach. To be honest with you, he wanted to be good, and I enjoyed coaching him. I was very grateful to be a part that hopefully helped him. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Maybe I just stayed out of the way of his talent. So, but he was fun. Now John was only played, if I remember right, 1 year of high school football before he came to South Carolina, and he was from a little small town, and when I left Miami and I went up to South Carolina, the first recruiting trip I went on, I went to see three defensive linemen in South Carolina. One went to Carolina, South Carolina. One went to Penn State, and one went to Tennessee. And all three of them were first round defensive ends. And it was amazing, for that 1 year coming out of the state of South Carolina. But John was from Lamar, South Carolina, small town, and he primarily was a basketball player till his senior year. And we brought him in, and we were lucky enough to get him. And John he definitely had to have been the fastest player I coached. John had a legitimate, he could run like a running back. He could run. Now, he had speed. But we played him as a true freshman. And combination, of things, we needed him. We were thin at the position, but John just played with energy. He didn't know maybe what he didn't know as a freshman, but it didn't really bother him. He just went out and played ball and played with, and he was a sponge. He wanted to be coached. He wanted to be good. I talked to John just a couple of weeks ago because one of the coaches that was at Carolina when I was there had passed away recently, and we had hoped to get together, but it didn't happen. But I try to stay up with John.
That's good, Coach. And it mentioned, having the speed of a running back. Obviously today, with the game changing the way that it is. The speed is at a premium. But, having a guy like that so long ago to have that elite level of speed definitely can change the game for you
And the
guys.
and he had the length too, to be a good, to help him with pass rush and stuff. But he could flat fly now. He could run.
Absolutely. Now, just prior to your stint at Louisiana Tech, you spent time at Duke, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Kentucky, Arkansas, Pitt State. Just walk me through one of your most memorable experiences or moment during your career.
Wow, that's pretty hard.
That lets you know you had a big
One,
time
the one,
career
the
when
one
you when you say it's
I
pretty
know
hard,
that
Coach.
really was in 1994, I think it was, uh, at Miami, playing Florida State in the Orange Bowl, the stadium. The Orange Bowl was a special place. You hear Farmer Canes talk about the OB. It was a special place. If you ever got a chance to see any highlights of that and see the end of the game and the fans, and my wife says the stadium was actually moving, and that was an amazing night right there. That was an amazing win. And Miami and Florida State had a rivalry as it was. And the year before, we were at Tallahassee, and they beat us, and that year they won the national championship. So it was a good rival. There was a lot of respect. Maybe a little more civil than some of the other rivalries that I've been a part of. But it was a good rivalry. But that was a great game, and that was an exciting situation. Some of the, I'm trying to think of some of the bowl wins we had, maybe, but the fact that we were at Kentucky 5 years and 4 years we went to a bowl, won 3 years in a row, never been done before in the history of the school. That was a good memory. Mostly it's the players, just so many of the good players, and I've lost two of them within the last year, just over the last year, tragically. And things like that happen. You appreciate the guys even more, and makes you want to stay in touch.
Coach, I didn't have a question for that, but I seen your post when they passed. They kind of passed back to back, like right at the same time there. Can you expound on your feelings from that and kind of how you found out, if you don't mind?
Uh, Jalen, I got a call from one of his teammates, one of the other defensive linemen, and he told me about it, and I immediately, worked on getting a hold of the Ravens and talking to, his was I guess they were fiance at that time, but uh, just trying to find out what happened. She wasn't there at that time, um, and I knew he had a pretty good mini camp, and whenever something like that happens, you know, sometimes you think you start reading it when you had conversation, when you talk to him. Should I've seen this? Could I've seen something going on, with him? What was, but I didn't see any of that, and I knew football hadn't gone as well as he had hoped, so far in his career, but I'd heard he was doing well, and training well and stuff. And, I knew he loved his kids, and, you know, what happened to him was as far away from my mind that I would have thought that, you know, that he would have been a part of that, or that would have happened. Um, and I don't know, maybe it was a freakish thing. I don't know. I never asked his girlfriend if there's a history, you know, or a recent history, but uh, it's it's just tragic, a young person to lose their life like that, And now with Emmanuel Turner, I don't know the whole story yet. he was shot, I think, a couple times by a female. And I've heard, and she was arrested. I don't think there was any threat, to her. And I don't know if it's factual or not, but I heard he may have even been shot in the back. But I don't, like I said, I don't know if that's factual or not. And but if you knew IT, that's what the players knew him as. I don't know that he. I don't know that you could ever would think that guy was intimidating / challenging or threatening. He just always had a grin on his face, and But they both died a year apart to the day, the exact day, and it it tells you that we got some issues in this country and in this world, and with our young people, and you can blame the instruments, but it's not necessarily, to me, the instruments. It's what everything else is.
Right. The instruments don't play themselves.
So say it was a gun, you could say. Now, I do have some very strong feelings about the fentanyl issue. I do have some biases about that, how a lot of that is perceived to be happening, and I think some of that could be stopped, but they hit those. Jalen and I were really close, and we were close, but Jalen and I were really close, and it that one really hurt. That hurt.
Yeah, I was actually at LSU when we played you guys in 18, and he had a heck of a game. I think he had 2 sacks against Joe. Man, I was like, man, that 6'5" animal is just murderizing our tackles, man. He's going to be a first round pick. And lo and behold, I think he was second round, but he was
He was third. They didn't have a second. And he some people thought he was going to be a first, but he fell a little bit. And I don't, I don't really know why. And some of it, I think he had a charge on him, I think, when he was in high school or something before he came to Tech. And I think that hurt him a little bit, but it was something that in the past, and I don't want to dwell in his, stuff like that, but it's some that, I mean, I could have gotten in trouble for, because I definitely been in a fight before. How many young men never haven't been in a fight when they're in high school, but I don't know. Jalen was a class young man, and our world is not as good. Our country is not as good without Jalen Ferguson and Emmanuel Turner.
No doubt, Coach. I truly sympathize with you on that. Prayers for the families and for you. So I want to kind of switch gears here and try to get back to the ball here, a little upbeatness. So I want to talk about your coaching philosophy and how it changed throughout your career, your coaching career from 78 up until when you retired. How did you go from being this young, energetic coach to like, okay, I'm 43 years in. So how did your coaching philosophy change? How did your coaching style change throughout your career?
I don't know if my style changed. I think you got to coach your personality, and so I think whatever your personality is, that's what comes out when you coach, and a lot of your personality, is how you're raised, what your background is, a lot of players would probably say, if they just met me or something, or just started coaching by me, they think that I was stern or strict or, demanding or whatever. But I'm a Midwest guy, and I don't know where y'all were raised, but if you're from Midwest and I mean, I'll just say maybe I was middle class, but I was probably not. I was below, but I was raised by a dad that didn't graduate from high school, was raised hard, and I was raised hard, um, so I coached demanding, but at the same time caring, I and tried to teach, and not just yell and scream. I wasn't a yeller and a screamer. I'd get attention if need be, I'd yell if they loaf. If you were loafing, you're gonna hear it. But if not, I was just gonna teach. And I don't know anywhere in a classroom. I never sat in a classroom with a teacher that screamed at me and cussed at me that I learned a thing from. So I tried to be a teacher, and that's one thing that Larry Lacewell, who I had worked under for 10 years, he really was teach, 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 rep, 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 get reps, don't waste time talking to them, have catchwords, keywords, get your reps, get your reps. You can't play defense. It's a reaction game. You gotta rep to get, learn how to react, so a lot of that, I was blessed to work under him for those 10 years because he was a hell of a defensive coach. He was a hell of a coach, and he was a great teacher, and he was very demanding, and he made you study the game. And so I try to get my players to be that way, to study the game, and so I don't know long. Everything, the style changed so much. If you're just talking about football, the style changed from my first few years. Back then, you're going to laugh. It was forearms, and there wasn't hands. I mean, it was back to using forearm shivers. You forearm and you get a hand on the outside pad, and back. So that was so much different. And then it changed. It started going to hands, and instead of, now at what is it? Attack, react, and react, attack. They all talked about that. Back then it was reading. It wasn't react, attack. You read, and took mirror steps that you used all. But it changed to using hands and doing attack, react, and I went and spent 2 camps with a coach named Dick Modzelewski up in Green Bay, who played his entire adult life was in the NFL. He played for the Giants back in the glory with the Y.A. Tittle and all that. And then he coached forever and ever, but he was a coordinator and a D-line coach. And then I also worked with, oh gosh, now I can't think of his name, but I want to say it's Bob Kermilowitz, but it isn't. Is it George Wheeler? I think it's George Wheeler. He was at Mizzou, and they were playing an aggressive attack style, but they were doing it out of 4-point stances. And then, it was all hands, hips, feet, hands, hips, feet, hands, hips, feet, talking about that. And then when I went to the Packers, they were playing 2-gap, crowding the ball, doing the same thing, hands, hips, feet, hands, hips, feet. So we adapted and went to that. And, it just grew from that, getting out of 4 points, getting into 3 points, hand to man, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it's always inside, hand down. It depends on wherever I was at, and with Coach Lacewell at Arkansas State, we weren't afraid to try something new. We were back then it was eagle defense, but now it's under defense. And I went from that to when Jimmy Johnson was at Oklahoma State, we went out and traveled there to see what they were doing with, it was called slide is what we called it. It was a 4-eye and a shade and a 5 and a tilt. We called it smoke, defensive end on the close side to the tight end. And so then we started playing with how we played the 4 eyes. We just did a lot of different stuff. And we first started with playing shades where you jab step read to guard, from a shade alignment as opposed to reading, so you could play back then all the zone option stuff, it helped you with that. So playing 4 eyes, reading inside, not reading inside, reading outside, inside like sevens, so we just weren't afraid to experiment and try different things. And Coach Lace will challenge you to try to expand yourself. So, and I took that attitude from there on, and just tried to adapt. When I went to Tech, we all of a sudden we started doing it at Duke, some playing up, and so I had to really study playing up. And when I got at Tech, I wasn't as I didn't like as much as how loose as they played, so even playing from up, we adjusted to what we're doing so that, I didn't like those tackles just getting those free dang runs on linebackers. So, we would do some things to try to, wasn't like being down in the stands, but we did some things to try to at least make them slide step to try to, before they got to the second level or to help the 3 technique or whatever was inside. But just try to change, just try to, study the game. That's one thing that Coach Lacewell demanded. You study the game. And I just spent a lot of time watching good players. You watch good players. Don't watch and when you watch them, don't think about what the coach is telling you. Look at what the player is doing. Look how he plays. And see what his footworks is, what his mechanics are, and then try to understand what they're doing. And you got to watch a lot of film, and then it bounces back to what we talked about earlier with the recruiting challenge that you guys have. You better have time at home to do some of it because you're not going to be able to otherwise. But now you got iPads too, and you got all this other stuff you can watch on too. So, but
Yeah,
my
we
recommendation,
talk
all young,
about we talk about taking it home, but it's tough to bring it home, and especially sometimes guys got old school coaches. They don't believe you work unless you're in the building. You ain't taking too much work home.
well, I understand. I can remember me calling my wife and asking her to put that 8-track tape in there and video this game. And so that when I had time later in the week during game week, when maybe they were in bed, I'd stay up. I'd be with the family, and then I'd stay up and stick that 8-track tape and go back forth, and look at again because some of that TV stuff you can see good D-line clips, and just hunt for the stuff. Just zoom through things and try to find it, and you know I still do that. I still DVR games and watch, and something will catch my eye, and I say, "How did he do that?" And I'll go back and look at it. So,
Yeah, just kind of staying in that realm, thinking back on your career. What was one of the toughest opponents you had? Maybe it was just a true player, offensive lineman, running back, quarterback, whatever team it was. What is one of the toughest opponents you've had before, or players that you played against that kind of you'll never forget it? It's a memorable moment.
well, we already talked about Tracy Ham at Georgia Southern. Now he was a load. Now, I mean, one year, and I can't remember what year it was at Arkansas State. It had to have been maybe our third year there. What Coach Lacewell, Dad, Coach Lace was from Fordyce, Arkansas. All right, his dad played with Bear Bryant. Bear Bryant was from Fordyce, Arkansas. Um, so Coach Lacewell was a GA at at Alabama at one time. Well, and somehow, some way, and we were 1AA by then, he ended up scheduling Alabama. And we had to go over and play Alabama in Birmingham. And that's when Alabama was Alabama just like they are now. I mean, they were good. And they were running the wishbone. And we put a scheme in out of we called it was out of 6 coverage, but we adjusted the safeties and all that on the fit so we could cheat a safety over into the boundary for the option. But they ended up beating our butts. But with what I remember about them is they got up and in came the second team, and you went, oh no. Because the second team was if they weren't as good, they were right there as good, and they were really hungry, and they really wanted to do a good job, and it was tough when they came in. It was a long night, but it was a good experience, and and we did find out that what we did with the adjustment with coverage was effective. So that was one. Uh, it's not the wins, I guess it's the losses. I guess I remember the Orange Bowl when I was at Miami playing Nebraska. They won the national championship. That game was a heck of a fight. Um, you know, oh, what was his name? Quarterback from Syracuse that played in the league for a long time.
McNabb,
Yeah, he
young
was.
McNabb.
Them was amazing. But I don't know. There's so many of them. It's hard to even think of one or the other. And they're on different magnitude. Maybe at Tech, with the bowl games we played in, maybe they may not have been. We beat Miami the last year I was there in the Independence Bowl. That was kind of nice. That was, but uh, the game winning those beat SMU when we put a beating on them. Oh, and then when we went and played in Hawaii and played in the Hawaiian Bowl, and I can't remember. Jalen set the record for sacks that was a great memory. He's got the NCAA record for sacks. And
Yeah,
who knows?
he was definitely a man child for sure.
Who knows how many he would have had if we went to, as his junior year, tied him down a little bit more instead of letting him go freelance so much, and that's why he probably became such a good power rusher because he tied himself down more and stuff. But he would have. I guess it all worked out because he ended up coming back and he stayed and he ended up doing it in the Wine Bowl and it was a great experience for him and everyone else to go to Hawaii and play in that bowl game. I know my wife liked it.
Awesome, Coach, and kind of staying, right there, talking about a little bit about your family, man. So what's like now for you, Rick? How are you spending your days with your family, and what are some of the things you enjoy doing?
Well, since I retired, you mean?
Yes, sir.
I've had a knee replacement. I've had a hip replacement. So some of the 3 years has been dealing with that. But we have 4 grandsons now. One of them is just 4 months old, so he's new. Uh, and my wife's really, she probably leads me more there than anywhere else. And then we retired. We got moved back here, and it wasn't much after that COVID hit and everything was shut down. So we had planned on a retirement trip to go to the Outer Banks. We went a couple times when we were at Duke, and we wanted to go to the Outer Banks after retiring, but we had to put that off a year. But we ended up doing that, so that was nice. That was fun. But now our older grandsons, one's playing baseball, one's playing soccer. The younger, the second one's playing soccer, and so I get to see all those. I miss so many of them with our 2 sons, but so spend our time that. I go to the Y, work out, have more time to go to church, than I did before. Involved with we're getting a little involved with the community here, which is we're on a committee with the Homeowners Association, the board. We're not on the board, but we're on a committee that we're trying to help the board, but try to also help it in a way that's going to help the community, maybe not so much the board, so we're dealing with that. And, but just trying to stay busy, want to do some more traveling, but haven't been able to do that yet. Would like to go out west, do some, maybe to the Dakotas and Montana and Wyoming, and been to Wyoming. Played at Bozeman, Montana, the year they won the national championship. And that was an eye opener when they had about 12 inches of snow on the ground. We fly in there, a bunch of kids from Arkansas in the South, and they see all that snow and their eyes get as big. Oh my God, what the heck are we into here? But
They said, I don't want none of that.
I know it was, and we got beat, and we're leaving, and it was rowdy, and there was a lot of drunks in that stadium, and there was a student just face down in a snow pile, just boom, he was just out, it was a crazy trip, but it was fun, but I don't know, we'd like to go out west, and we're just kind of going slow. I'd like to be honest with you. I wouldn't mind doing a little bit of something, help somewhere, whatever they're called now. Old man, get out of the way, I guess it would be called.
Defensive analysts, consultants.
Yeah, I guess. Whatever
Go
the
consult
title.
with some guys.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind doing something. I can't do too much though. My wife would kick my butt, so
I'm
she
sure.
put up with it for 43 years. I don't think. Well, 42. She wasn't there for the first, but she deserves her time too.
Well, no doubt. You deserve every bit of time you get off too. So it's time for it. So, Coach, we're at this segment right now. I kind of want to get into, when you look at the name of this podcast, it's TrenchMob Testimonies. And I always ask this question, how or what was your greatest test in your life that led you to be able to share your testimony with us right now?
You mean what challenges I had in life you're talking about?
That's it. The challenge, the hard times, that test that you went through.
While I was coaching, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. It could be in life in general. It could be in coaching. It could be whatever that case that may be for you. That kind of just it took you for a loophole when you went through it, but it helped you become the man of who you are right now.
Well, I think we're all creatures of the way we're raised, and I think that's something I touched on it briefly, but I'm not going to dive all the way back into that. But the first year I was at Miami in '93, there was a fight on the football field, and I was like a dummy, so pay attention to what I'm saying. I went in there like you see a lot of these coaches jump in there, try to break it up and all this stuff. Well, I got hit, and I don't remember who. Obviously I didn't know who it was. No one knows who it was, but and it was kind of like you just shake it off. You don't worry about it. And 2 nights later, I wake up in the middle of the night with a headache that's just killing me. And then I got up to get ready to go to practice. We were in 2 days, and I was shaving, and I kept turning my head like this to try to shave. And I called my wife and I said, "Is there something wrong with lights in here?" And she said I was slurring, and I was dragging aside. Well, long story short, they ended up taking me to the hospital, and I spent 6 days in the hospital. They were trying to figure out what was wrong with me, and they finally found a tear and right back here in my head and an artery, and I had a stroke, an ischemic stroke, and I got out after 6 days, multiple tests trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with me, MRIs. I found out I didn't like being in an MRI too, um, and I got out of that, and I was legally blind. I couldn't drive, because I had vision cut is what it was. I could, so I ended up having to pass a driving test again and vision test, and short-term memory was affected. Um, so I had to really be careful what I did, you know, coaching wise. I had to build back up, and coaches had to drive me. Randy Shannon drove me to work a lot. Tommy Tuberville was there then. He helped me, but that was a challenge in itself. I'm not a video game guy, but and this is in the '90s, so but Tetris, I played Tetris to try to train my eyes to see, because I know y'all played Tetris before, right? Y'all have, you'd see the stuff that come from different places, so I had to train my eyes to try to track and do that, so that was a challenge, um, and I had another physical challenge the first year I was here at Kentucky. Um, and the family was still in Oxford, Mississippi, and I was in a 1 bedroom apartment. And I woke up in the middle of the night, another one of those middle of the night things, and didn't feel good. Just was bothering me. So I ended up calling the trainer and came and got me, and I had a clot, and they had to do a stent. And this was the night before camp started. So that was another few days out, but I bounced back from that pretty good. That wasn't as bad. Just the other deal at Miami was much more demanding, much more of an effect physically. It took me a while. It took me really quite a while, and I still have some vision cut, but it's that was a challenge.
Well, I can tell you this right here: God is good because you're here and you're able to give us your testimony on that, because that's something I've never heard before. That's a unique situation. I know.
Don't get in those fights. Stay away from those fights.
Right. Most definitely stay away from the fight, especially in Miami. The Hurricanes that at that time they were fighting almost every other day.
Oh, no, it ain't true. Now that see that's one thing I hated. Those
Right.
guys
You got
are good
you got that
people now.
on you every time.
It's always they remember that show, stuff. I tease to the day the two of the defensive ends that I think helped start that. I'm not going to give their names on this show, but to the day when I see them, I bust their butts. I said, "You're the cause. You guys are the cause." Now, but they're good people and they were competitive. You know how it is with, you got competitive people, and back then it was 2-a-days and it was day, pound, pound, pound. It was practice, and it gets kind of old, and the tempers get a little short, and things get hot and when you're competitive, and so things like that happen. It just happens. Jalen, as good as he was, I mean, one of his best buddies was an offensive tackle, and they, invariably at once about every 2 months they get in it. So it just happens.
No doubt. That's understandable. Well, Coach, I appreciate your time. I truly do. So much knowledge that we gain from this. You talk about playing that 4-eye and reading that inside guard, and then come back and changing, and now you're reading the inside tip of the pad of the tackle, and you're going both ways with it, and you're going from a 3-down to a 4-down, and just changing the whole defensive scheme up front, from shooting the flippers, throwing your forearm, to using your hands, and just that going from different decades of coaching defensive line, you've had to evolve so much, and your test made you evolve in life. Things you couldn't do or you had to do differently because of your situation, your challenge that you went through. So I'm thankful that you came on with us and shared your story with us and talked a little ball with us as well. Coach, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate that you were able to have such a great career, a wonderful career, which we as young coaches we're learning from now, as we can look back on and see some of the things that you've done and how can we take from that and get better at ourselves. So thank you. I appreciate you.
Well, I enjoyed it. Think about it with the zone read. With your 4 eyes, you guys play 4 eyes. They just arc outside of you. And if the back is to you, you might want to read inside when you're playing a 4-eye as opposed to reading a tackle. I know we did some of that at sevens at Louisiana Tech. It was, where was the back? What did we read? It depended on where the back was. Because with the zone read concept, playing a 7 technique, and they're arcing that tight end and blocking inside with the back to your side. I mean, if you go up before you go in, that's
Done
a big
deal.
old ball, and you're playing the outside fit of the dive and the inside fit of the quarterback, and you're going to have to chase that dive, and you're not going to be able to react back out on the quarterback. So you guys, it's option football now that you're dealing with. They don't want to talk about it, but that's what the spread a lot is. So.
That's right. And Rick, man, it was a pleasure to meet you tonight and hear your testimony and hear you speak. A lot of powerful words, man. My heart goes out to you and your family for your guys, man, that you lost. And I just appreciate your time of getting on here and sharing your knowledge with us and let us pick your brain on some things and just get to know you just a little bit more too. For those that don't know a lot about you, which I'm sure they do, but just for the listeners who are just listening and just tuning in and getting to know you, it was a pleasure tonight, and I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, guys. I enjoyed it. And if I can help, let me know. Always love talking.
We'll do it, Coach. That's TrenchMob Testimonies, and we're out.
All right.